for me, it was a way to really empower and inspire people to join tech in different ways. And as I started capturing conversations, things evolve. Things evolve. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to talk about tech, and what tech is just such a diverse field. It's such a big area. So I decided to really focus on people, Latinx that were working in tech, and then founders, so Latinx founders and investors. So we eventually added investors because we know that we need to form the whole ecosystem. And I interview maybe 95% of the people that I interview are of Latinx descent, but lately I've been interviewing people that contribute to the conversation and they're allies and champions. So for example, yesterday I dropped an episode by Brad Feld, who is like a legend in the startup community. He's an author and a very active venture capitalist. And his commitment was like, I'm gonna loan my time to, or give my time to causes that I care about. And he wanted to share some of the knowledge from his latest book with our community. So it's been like an interesting journey for me to capture these different stories. And for those of you that are really, really interested and passionate about sharing your story or amplifying not just your voice, but other people's voices, I really encourage you to consider podcasting. And then I'm going to share my screen with you so we can go through some slides that I kind of prepared. And I talk very fast. So I usually try to slow down when I'm recording, but right now I'm talking very fast, I know. So how do you launch and grow your podcast? Well, the first thing that you probably want to do is really think about why you're doing what you're doing. So this is me. I am a podcaster, I'm a community builder. I really want people, I consult. And lately, or most recently, I became a counselor as well. My long-term goal is to get my 3,000 hours in the next couple of years so I can really focus on Latinx in tech. So, but I've been doing counseling. But one of the things that I did as I launch into this journey as a content creator, is I felt that podcasting is such a great thing to do, but it could be a thing that you do that it could be very lonely because you are kind of here. I have this little studio that was built in our garage, and I'm talking to people or with people, but at the beginning I was not seeing very many Latinx. So I went to the biggest podcast movement or the biggest podcasting conference in the world, Podcast Movement, and I saw like a handful of Latinx faces the first time I went, like in 2018. It was in Philly. And I'm like, we need to find a way to like get more people to podcast and share stories and, elevate the stories and the voices of our community. So then I launched the We Are Diverse Creators Summit, and we're working on having the next summit in August and making it free for people to come and kind of learn from one another. Um, when I started as a podcaster, I didn't know everything that I know now. So if I had known some things, I could have saved money and time. So We Are Diverse Creators. It's going to happen in August again of next year as we launch, as we get into Latinx Heritage Month the following month. So hopefully you will have a month to kind of launch your own podcast. But, I do recommend that you go to Podcast Movement. They have a website, Podcast Movement, and they actually have a 28-day free program that will walk you through how to launch your podcast every single day. And that's how I launch my podcast. Every single day I had this homework that I had to do, and they go over the very basics. They don't get into all the audio quality. As I've evolved, one of the things that I wish I had known when I started podcasting was that audio quality is super important, especially for people that are really into listening to different podcasts. Sometimes people just tune in for the first 30 to 60 seconds. And if your podcast sounds like it's not really professionally done or the sound is a bit off, they're going to just tune off. They're going to move on to the next one. So if you listen to some of the episodes from my first season, and I'm a super perfectionist, right? So when I listen to my episodes from the first season, I'm like, oh my God, I should have done this, or I should have done that. So I highly recommend that you think about your equipment. Like, what is it that you're gonna get? What's gonna make you sound great? How do I sound right now? Can you guys give me like a thumbs up or thumbs down on how my sound? Yeah. Okay. So I didn't sound like this up until November when I got this new mic, which is the Shure MV7. So I highly recommend it. I do have a link that I can send to you. It's called Shure MV7, and I like it because it's a USB, so you can plug it into your computer. It's very, very simple. And that was really important for me when I was when I was launching my podcast. I just wanted to hook it up to my laptop, find a program where I could record, and then find the best and easiest way to edit things. So I started with a really, really basic microphone, and I'll show it to you because I have it here. It's an ATR 2100. It's an Audio Technica 2100. And this is my microphone for a year and a half or so. And then I moved on to like a higher version or a better version, like the $100 version of the Audio Technica. But Audio Technica is actually a really good company, and they have really reliable dynamic mics that you can use. So that's I recommend this, and my daughter's actually using it to podcast now. I have an 11-year-old daughter, and she has her own podcast. She launched it when she was 10. It's called Cool and Crazy Podcast. So if my 10-year-old can launch her own podcast, by having me walk her through it, I hope that I can also help you do the same thing. So mic is really important. Also, where are you going to record it? So I bought this service. It's called Hindenburg, that I use. You can use it to edit. Like NPR uses it in their radio room to edit. Um, I decided early on, though, that I was not going to be editing my own stuff because it was taking me forever to learn. Like I tried Audacity. Audacity is free, so you don't have to pay if you're really if you're a techie, which many of you are, and you're really into editing your own stuff. You can do that for free. Um, I felt that I just didn't have the time, and I just didn't have the skill to be able to do that. So I went on Fiverr. And how many of you use Fiverr or have ever heard of Fiverr? Okay. It's like Upwork, right? And you have a lot of great people. Sometimes they like charge you $10 to edit your stuff, and then you get a $10 worth of edits. But you can actually find some really good editors or producers um, through Fiverr. And I found mine almost 3 years ago, and we've been together almost 3 years ago. And he charges me a very affordable price. He is in Venezuela, and he does just an amazing work. So if you listen to all well, not all, but if you listen to some of my episodes, you'll see that the quality of his work is really good. He knows my style. He knows that I hate and he knows that I hate us, and a lot of you knows and likes, and he knows where to take where and when to take them off. So it comes out really polished. So it's really up to you and your style. I was talking to someone that was going to launch their podcast or wants to launch their podcast, and for them, it was really important to sound authentic. So they wanted to keep like the ums and the ahs and everything else. That's not me. That's not my personality. So it really depends. So it really depends on who you are and what kind of quality you want. But I highly recommend like Fiverr for that. So you also need a hosting platform. So your hosting platform is going to be really important. That means that's the platform that's going to give you the RSS feed that you're going to send to Apple, and definitely Apple and Google Podcasts, and then everyone and Spotify, and then everyone else. There are some groups like Pandora that, or some platforms like Pandora that won't let you submit your RSS feed to them until you've been established. So you've been podcasting, you've been releasing content regularly for like 3 to 6 months or something. Um, Libsyn, Libsyn, and I also have a little code for you guys if you're interested. That I can share with you. Um, they I mean they have a fee. So you the other thing that you have to keep in mind is that some of these services cost money, right? So if you're outsourcing your the editing or the production of your podcast, that's going to cost you a little bit of money. If you're paying for a platform to host your podcast, it's going to cost you a little bit of money. There are some platforms like Anchor that are free, but sometimes you're free you're you're provided a free service because you are you're they're kind of selling your stuff or doing things with your content. So I would be careful anytime someone offers something for free, because then you're really like their product. If they're giving it to you for free, they're using something, whatever it is that you're doing, in some way. So but a lot of people like get started, like my daughter's friend launched a podcast and she's on Anchor, and that works totally fine for her. So it really what works for you and also your budget. What I'm telling you right now, the information that I'm sharing in terms of the services, will get you to launch with a budget under $100. From buying this mic, when I bought it, it was like $26. I think because everyone started podcasting and we have this pandemic and everybody needs a nice mic. Now they've gone up a little, but it's still fairly affordable. So you need the platform. The other thing that you do need is to really understand, to really know what kind of brand you want to have for your podcast. Like, who's your audience? So you need to, that's part of what you need to do in terms of, who's this podcast for? Why am I creating it? Who's going to be listening to it? And creating that kind of persona. Because just like with anything, when you start creating content and you're not really targeting your content, you're just saying, oh, I'm creating it for anyone that's interested in da 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 da. Then you might create something. When you create something for everyone, sometimes it just doesn't, no pega, right? No pega. So you're not going to be hitting the audience that you should most ideally be targeting. So what's your podcast? What is it about? What are your goals? Why are you doing what you're doing? When I started because I wanted to increase diversity in tech, and I wanted more stories of Latinx and tech that I knew to be shared with the world, so people knew that it wasn't impossible for them to get to where my guests were. So um and that I've been able to thankfully scale in a very different way through partnerships and collaborations that I've been able to do. So what your goals, make sure that you really write down what you're interested in doing. Your budget, if you're going to outsource some of this work, some people charge 150 to 250, sometimes 350. And if you're going with some of the bigger companies, and depending how much work you want done, $600 per episode. I met someone that wanted to do a corporate that does corporate podcasts, and he charges about $1,500 per episode. So that's a lot of money. And I'm not producing that. That's not necessarily, you're paying for people's time, and they have a whole different team. So if you're doing it on your own, if you're an indie podcaster, I would say realistically looking at a $500 budget or so to pay for hosting, to pay for equipment, to pay for if you want to do advertising. I've never paid for advertising, but I'm actually lying. I did pay one time $10 because Facebook gave me a $10 voucher, or the credit they try to get you to advertise, and I did use their little $10. So I guess I did, but it just wasn't for me. But if you want to amplify in different ways and reach different target communities, paying for advertising could be something that you might want to include in your budget. Graphics, you're gonna have to pay for graphics unless you are like Oscar, who who is on our team, that is a great designer. You're going to have to pay for someone to design your logo, because specifically Apple, when you're submitting your podcast to Apple, and it doesn't cost any money for you to submit to all of these different places. So if anyone is saying like, we're going to charge you to submit to be part of our platform, then yeah, walk away, because there's a lot of free things that you can upload to. For Apple, there are very, very specific requirements for your graphics. And you also want a graphic that you're comfortable with. If you're, anyone can do Canva, like I can do Canva. but I'm not a graphic designer. So, so if you want it to look good and if you want it to really be part of your brand, you want to be something that you're proud of, hiring a graphic designer. You can go on Twitter and you can just, tweet like looking for, if you want to stay within la comunidad, looking for a Latinx graphic designer. And then you're gonna get tons of people to say, oh, like designing chicas doing things. There are different people out there that can support you. Um, the other thing is like, the people that are going to be listening to you. Um, right now, one of the things that I'm seeing is that there's a lot more interest like in vidcasting too. So in addition to doing the audio, are you going to upload your content to YouTube, and what is that going to look like? And one thing that I wish I would have known when I started was to really think about accessibility. And I spoke with an accessibility expert. Uh, I interviewed her and she's like, you should always think like website accessibility first, or anything that you do accessibility first. Because what's happening right now, it's some podcasters or actually some big companies are getting sued because their podcasts are not accessible. So they're audio only. So think about transcription. If you're going to be doing your first podcast, think about how you're going to transcribe that content. And I highly recommend a product called Descript. And I use it. If you've seen some of my audiograms and some of the content that I produce, I use it. I also like it if i- if you want to do your own editing, it makes it super easy because you can copy and paste. It's literally like you have this Word document, you can cut and copy and paste and do all kinds of magic, and it works really wonderfully. So it's called Descript, and that's also something that you need to put on your budget if that's something that you want to do. They have an annual fee. I think it's about $200. So once again, it's still within that overall $500 or less budget that you can use. How is it going to be distributed? We talked about the platforms. Once you have the RSS feed, that's golden. You can launch your website, something that I recommend too, that I didn't do right away. I used the website that Libsyn provides a website where, I keep track of all my episodes. It's a very simple website. And then I eventually like launched my own website. But that's something that if you really want to get it out there and you want to put your episodes on your website, if you want to start a blog, one of the things that I do now when I interview guests is I ask them to do a 300 to 500 word blog, because then I can publish on Wednesday, Friday or Monday, I'll publish their blog. So they're getting a lot more visibility, and their message is getting out there a bit more. And obviously I give them credit that it's their blog, it's their blog post, but it's a community contribution to what I'm doing. So think about having a website. We talked about the audience and building persona, which is really, really important. Think about, for those of you that are in marketing or that work at a company that has a really strong marketing team, make friends with them because they'll help you build that persona. And they'll share where resources are so you can build that persona that you want to target. And then at the end of the day, what's going to make you happy? Is it the number of downloads that you're going to have? Is it the impact that you're going to have on one or two people? Is it monetizing? Some people like want to monetize for their work. So, um, they they had to get a certain number of downloads to be like Joe Rogan or to be like one of the big podcasters or Latino USA. Some of the ones that we hear, there's a lot of production involved. And it I think monetizing through sponsorships, especially if you're working with a niche market, it's probably the best way to go. Or seeking support from your community. I had never done a buy me a coffee until like I think December is when I launched the buy me a coffee, and people actually bought me coffees, and people were like, "Oh, we're really excited about the work that you're doing, and here I'm gonna buy you 5 coffees or something like that." And I also had like sponsor an episode. So some of the guests that I had interviewed, they're like, oh, we love what you're doing. We want to sponsor one of your episodes. And I the prices are really low. I just put like 150 and then $5 coffees or whatever. But it's something that I think for me it was more the fact that people were appreciating the work that I was doing, and then it also helped me come up with a little bit of funding, so we could do some of the work that I wanted to do with Latinx America Media. The next thing, and knowing not just knowing where you want to go with your podcast, but also understanding your limitations. So there are people that are that have a lot more time than others, and you're all probably working full time, or you're looking for a job, or something's happening in your life. You might have kids, you might have a dog that needs you, you might enjoy like a lot of hiking time, things when you're not going to be in front of a computer, or editing or doing X, Y, or Z for your podcast. So you need to be really realistic about how often you want to publish. Do you want to publish every week? Do you want to publish every day? Do you want your podcast to be 30 minutes? Do you want it to be an hour? Do you want it to be 10 minutes? And that's really important for you to kind of think about at the beginning. When we started my daughter's podcast, there was no way her podcast was going to be more than like 10-15 minutes, and we knew that. So all her episodes are like, she does all the research and she does all the scripts, and they're solo interviews, and once a month she interviews one person, and those are a little bit longer, like 10-15 minutes. I think the longest was 20, but she knows. So every week she publishes on a Friday. On the other hand, when I started, I was kind of all over the place in terms of like, oh, well, I think it's going to be 45 minutes. I'm just going to let my guests talk. And some guests really like to talk. So you can go up to like an hour and a half talking to someone. But who's going to listen, honestly? Like, raise your hand if you listen to like podcasts that are more than an hour. Oh, no, no, no. For me, it was like after a while when I was started listening, oh, good, we have someone that does listen to more than an hour. I guess it depends on the topic, right? And if you're really already hooked in what it is that's happening out there. But for me, and I think for many people, and some of the research shows that you have a captive audience for X amount of time. So I decided that I was going to limit my episodes to 30 to 35 minutes. So most of my episodes now are 30 to 35 minutes. And then something else that I changed for this season was that, remember I mentioned at the beginning that you capture your audience between the first 30 to 60 seconds. I used to have my intro and my outro, and that's also going to be really important that you start working on the format of your podcast. So I have this intro, and then I have an outro that's already pre-recorded, and then I record my interviews with my guests, and then from that recording, I take out like a 30-second to a minute long excerpt using Descript, and then my producer puts it at the beginning, because I want people to kind of jump in and start listening to what the conversation is about before I launch into like, hi, this, you're listening to Adriana Flores in the Latinx America podcast, my standard intro. And then from the standard intro, I go right into the interview. And depending on whether or not I have a sponsor or not, I do either my little sponsor ad in the middle or right at the beginning. Never at the end. It doesn't make sense to do a sponsor ad at the end, because sometimes people don't stay for the whole thing. So be realistic about your cadence, but also the limits around, and also how long you want your episodes to publish. I have a friend that publishes a podcast called Mija Podcast, and it's like, she was on the cover of, like, she was on the New York Times, one of the big screens. I forgot the names of the name of it, but one of the big TV screens uh, on Times Square, not New York Times, Times Square. And her episodes are 8 minutes. And she did a series. It's called Mija Podcast, and she talks about like her family and her parents and stuff, but she limits that. So understand what you want, and how long you want that to you want to share it for. So consistency is really important. You're going to build you're going to build an audience, you're going to build a community if you're consistent. If you're going to say you're going to publish on a Thursday, then publish on Thursday. Even if it's Thursday at 11:59 at night, get it out on a Thursday. There have been times when life happens for me and I've gotten it out the following day or something, and that's okay. But now, I've been podcasting for 3 years, but I try not to I try not to let it go too much. It weighs on me. So start by building your content calendar. Like, who do you want to interview? Why do you want to interview? When do you want to interview them? And also, do you have a connection to them in some way? So do that, because that's going to help you as you think about not just the length, but also when and how you want to publish. And as I mentioned, quality is really important. There are different tools that you can use to engage your audience besides asking them to like you on Facebook and or like your page or something. Leverage whatever tools are out there. One of the ones that I recently discovered is Clubhouse. Clubhouse is pretty cool. I don't know how many of you guys are in Clubhouse. Like, do the thumbs up if you're. Yeah, it's a pretty cool because it's so informal. It's like audio content and it's so informal. And I was recently invited to join another one, another. I don't know if I wouldn't say it's another Clubhouse type of, but it's a new app that's going to launch. It's on beta form right now, and it's a Mark Cuban kind of venture, and it's going to be interesting because I think we're going to start seeing a lot of things where you're going to be consuming a lot more information through audio. And in the case of Clubhouse, it can be as formal as you want it to be, or it can be as informal as you want it to be too. So and then last but not least, partnerships have been really helpful for me in terms of getting some really awesome guests, and also for people to really get to know what the podcast is about. So I think partnerships and collaborations can really make a difference. And measure your success accordingly. Success to one person could be like 1,000 downloads. Success to someone else could be actually having 100 people listen to them. And be very realistic and be very kind to yourself, because at the beginning you're putting something out to the world when we have now millions of podcasts out there. In 2012, 2013, it was like a new thing, but now everyone's podcasting. Like, I think Paris Hilton just came out with one. So be totally realistic too, because you have celebrities that transition from radio shows to podcasting. And if you're quote unquote competing for like number of downloads with celebrities, it just doesn't make sense. So like, if you're listening to I don't listen to Joe Rogan, and I keep using him because like that's the only person I know that got like millions of dollars from Spotify or that. But anyway, be realistic about what success means to you. So the next thing is keeping your end goal in mind, connecting with your audience. Make sure that you expand your vision. As I mentioned, Latinx America has changed every single year. So every year I sit down and I look at what has been done in terms of like reach, in terms of feedback that I get from the community that I serve. Like today when I dropped the episode, like someone that never comments on my drops said, "Oh my God, I can't believe you interview this person, and it's such a big thing." And I get like LinkedIn messages from like, "Oh, how were you able to land this person?" And it's not about landing that person. It's like, hey, you're actually listening and seeing and engaging in some way, right? And it's making a difference for you. So sit down and kind of reevaluate. You can do that every few months, or you can do that, once a year. Make sure that you're using the right tools, the right equipment, not just to record and to edit, or that you're outsourcing it in the right place. That's going to make a huge difference in terms of your time, because if you are not spending X amount of time worrying about like minute things, you can do a lot of other things. I actually just learned about a new platform called Postal Plan that I started using this season. And Postal Plan is amazing because what it allows you to do is allows you to schedule your social media your social media posts like weeks in advance if you want. So all I have to do is like when I'm ready on Sunday, then I know that I'm going to release on Wednesday. You can kind of pre-schedule everything, and it just saves a lot of time and allows you to focus on other things. So create your social media engagement, whatever that means to you, whatever platform. Some people are really big on Instagram, other people are really big on Twitter, depending on where your audience is going to. So really understanding your audience is going to help you figure out where you're going to spend most of your time in terms of social media engagement. You can monetize. That's, that's an option that it happens, and it happens. It Monetization can happen in different ways. There are networks. I've been invited to join networks where they actually they sell ads and that get inserted in your podcast, and that's an option that some people have. And but I'm not part of the network, so but that's an option that you should be aware of. Rebrand. I've some of my one of my friends, actually, if you listen to Emociones or Emotions in Harmony, her podcast started as a podcast in Espanol, and then she rebranded it to Emotions in Harmony, and she just put out some content a few weeks ago because she's been consistently putting out information about COVID, since the beginning of COVID too. She's a therapist, of 30 years focusing on trauma, Carmen Roman, and she went through the whole rebrand. So sometimes when you think about, like, oh my God, how am I going to start from scratch again and do this? Well, she now has like a million. One of her episodes had 1 million downloads on YouTube or something like that. So I mean, she's doing something the right way. So rebranding doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to start from scratch. It could be that, you're going to maximize what the content that you already have. And she's been able to repurpose some of the content that she already had. And then, like, I do seasons. So I've been consistently publishing, and I think I took 1 month off between seasons last year, but I'm over, I think, over 200 if you look at all the other ones that I haven't unpublished. But I've been super consistent about publishing. But people take a break sometimes, and they rework their content and they put it out as in the way they rebrand it. It comes out a little bit differently than when they initially posted it. So it's something that I suggest, that if you wanted to do something like that, and take a break when you need it. And then obviously practice self-care as a counselor in training. I should mention that self-care is extremely important, and sometimes the topics that you cover in the episodes could be pretty heavy, like, when you're talking with people who have been undocumented, or people that have suffered trauma in the past, or people that are dealing with addiction. I recently released the first episode of a series on mental health, and that also came out, Sal. I don't know if I shared this with you, but it came out of the Techqueria presentation that I did, where people were like, we want to know more about mental health and Latinos in tech. So I tap my network, and LinkedIn is a great place where you can just you can friend a lot of different people. So I tapped my network, and I said, hey, I'm putting this together, are you guys interested in joining? And this is what I want to cover. So we recorded 12 episodes where we're talking with therapists, like licensed people that are working with people that are dealing with trauma, addiction, depression, anxiety, all the different topics within the mental health space. And they're not providing professional advice, but they're giving you a general overview of things that could be done, and people that you could see, and strategies that work. So think about self-care in that way. And with that, I'm ready for some questions. And I don't know if they've been coming up because I've had it on presentation mode, but I'm ready for some questions.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Well, hi, how are you?
Good. Nice to meet you, Florita.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you to everyone, because I'm very new in the taqueria. But, well, do you think there are some areas who are crowned in podcast? Because I know some people are started last year with a new podcast, and I don't know, what do you feel about the industry, if they are some space, or there are areas who has a lot of podcasting who are not very interesting, or who are very crowded, some of the more of the same?
I think it really depends, because when you look up like entrepreneurship, there's tons of people like podcasting about entrepreneurship. Even with like mental health, there's a lot of people that have mental health podcasts, but everyone has a different spin. When I started, there were only two podcasts with Latinx, the Latinx name on it, or and one was Latinx Therapy, and then LatinxAmerica. And now we have, I mean, we also have Conexiones, we have the Techqueria podcast, we have Braulio, who's podcasting about technology, and we're all podcasting and interviewing interesting people, but it's different. Like I can listen to their podcast and learn, and I don't see it like almost, I don't see it as like something being too crowded. It's like everyone has a different perspective to share and a different approach on how we share things. So think about, I wouldn't be as concerned about like the crowd, how crowded the space is. I would be more concerned about like, how is it what I want, how is what I want to share going to be received by the audience that I want to target, right? Because for example, America and Oscar, their podcast is also about Latinx and tech, or they're talking to Latinx and tech, but the way they deliver it is very different. It's like casual conversation, and they're having fun and they're laughing, and it's, you know, they're co-hosting. The way I deliver it is different too. So I think it's, think about not so much limiting yourself. It's more like how can what I have to say have an impact in the space that I want to have an impact on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I've got one, Adriana.
Sure.
You mentioned at the beginning to set realistic goals for yourselves. What would be, I guess, some realistic metrics for like downloads or?
So the last time I was at a conference, I heard that the average in terms of the downloads, like if you're doing really well, and this was at a conference last year, it was like about 150 downloads per episode, which when you think about it, could be low, but then you have tons of other podcasts going out there. The thing that I would say is think about it in the long term. Like some of the episodes, you'd be surprised. Some of the episodes from my first season, people are starting to listen to to them, even though it's like been 3 years since I've been podcasting. So think about that. Think about that too. Is that it's content, and try to keep your content as evergreen as possible. The other thing about being realistic, aside from metrics, aside from like the number of downloads, is engagement. It's like, how engaged do you want your community to be? My daughter has like 50 kids or 50 people that tune in every single week, and they're engaged in some way, and they send her little notes and things like that. Would that be something that you would want, you know? So looking at those goals. And then the last thing that I would say in terms of setting realistic goals and expectations is like, what is it going to mean for your life in terms of, you know, putting this content out every week or every 2 weeks or once a month. Although I don't recommend that you go once a month, because then you're not going to build an audience. So either once a week or every other week, just so you can have some kind of continuity. So, but that's a goal. That's more of a goal for you in terms of like what that's going to mean for your life.
A follow-up on the audience engagement. Would you recommend that we have social media handles created already for?
Oh my God. Yes, absolutely. And I'm gonna put together, actually I have a checklist somewhere, but I'll bring it out. But you want to have you want to make sure that your name has not been taken, you know, because some people like trademark, like I finally got my trademark this last year, but the name hasn't been taken, and yeah, and you're going to be consistent across the different platforms. And something that I did at the beginning, it's like, yeah, I came up with the name and I started, you know, I started putting it out there, and then I realized that LatinxAmerica had been taken on Twitter. So mine is America Latinx, so I al revés, but it's still out there. So yeah, so Twitter handle, Instagram handle, whatever handle you have out there, it's important that you get it right away.
Thank you.
No problem. What other questions do we have? Hi, Ed.
Hey, Adriana, this is Ayla. How are you?
Hi, Ayla.
Thank you so much for sharing such amazing information. I have so many notes already scribbled down on my sheet, but one of the what my question comes, maybe not so much on the topics or the theme around the show or the programming. My focus, or at least my goal, is to target a specific audience, and that's more of like my parents' generation and older. So how did you, I guess maybe I don't know exactly what I'm looking for in terms of the information, but is there resources or insight into what different audiences use as their primary platform for information, media, or things like that? Because
Yeah.
from my personal experience, my parents are typically not listening to podcasts, but I know that they would benefit from it if they became aware of them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No. So I would recommend the Pew Research Hispanics, Pew Research Center. They put out a lot of information on, consumption, media consumption in Latinos, and when they do their surveys, they target different age groups. The other one will be Nielsen. I had to tell you that every abuelita, everybody that has a WhatsApp group, right? Abuelitas, tios, the older ones, there's such a potential for discovery in the Latino market. And the report was released by Edison Research. So I would recommend you take a look at that one too. Edison Research about Latinos podcasting in the US. And they also provide some insights. But what I would do, the way I would approach it is I would talk to your abuelita or, your parents' generation and then look at what they're listening, what they're consuming. I grew up in a household where, and I worked for Univision before, I forgot to mention that, but I grew up in a household where we watched Univision every single day, and that's how my grandma learned about me going to college and what I need when I needed to apply for like the FAFSA and all this stuff. She was like, "Ya aplicaste porque Jorge Ramos was like saying da 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 da."
Yes.
And I was and I was so like lucky to actually like write some stuff that Jorge Ramos had to say when I worked at Univision, because I was working on it, the education campaigns. But you understand the power of the information that they need, right? So we know that health, immigration, and I think it was economic prosperities. Those were like some of the top three like topics that the community really wanted to know more about. So let's say that you're going to do something like on immigration stories from different generations. So talk to them, like what appeals to them, and almost do like your own little focus group, and then start putting together your content calendar. Like, who would you want to, interview? What are the topics that you think would be important for them and relevant for them, and in a way with messaging that would appeal to them, right? So I would start with doing that focus group, and then also tapping some of the other research info that I shared.
Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Hi, Adriana. So for me, I've been thinking about doing a podcast for 3 years now.
Oh, wow.
Since I was in college. And I haven't done it yet. So I was wondering if you've encountered people like me that are like, I literally have like my episodes written down, like the first 20 episodes written down, what I want them to be about, who I want to feature in them. I just haven't executed it. And I think that it's because a platform issue. Like I don't know what platform to start on. So yeah, have you met anybody like me? And if so, what's your advice to somebody like me to just do it like Nike?
I recently learned of this phrase, and you just have to start ugly. Just start ugly. Like but you have to get started. So sign up for that 28-day challenge, because they're going to walk you through everything. By 28 days, you're going to be releasing an episode. Ugly, pretty, como sea, but you're going to get it out to the world. The other thing that I would offer too is, if you wanted to sit down for a session and just hang out and, with me on a weekend when my kid, mind my kids screaming in the background sometimes, I can kind of walk you through all the different things just to make it easier, to get you started, especially if you've already done all the work. You already have, your content outlined. Do you know the people that you want to interview already, or are they dream people?
It's people for it would mostly be me by myself, but I have people that I would want to feature. I wouldn't call them like dream people, but yeah, kind of. But it's people that I like know, like in the industry or
Yeah.
pertaining to that specific topic, if that makes sense. And also the program is through podcast movement, right?
Yes, Podcast Movement 28-day challenge.
Okay, thank you. And yes, I would love to sit down with you if possible, whenever you have time. I'd really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure that you guys get my contact info, but it's like very easy, LatinxAmerica@gmail.com, or just like go to the website and then just, click somewhere and they'll send me a notice that you want to chat. But yeah, I definitely would want to do that. I feel it's really important to get the more diverse voices we get out there, different perspectives, even if we're talking about similar topics. I think it's super important. So especially if you've done all the work, and if it's a solo podcast, you just got a script. You have to get the teleprompter app. I'll walk you through all the little different things that you need to do, and then just get it out there, even if it's ugly.
Thank you. I think that's what I'm getting past right now, because I was trying to start this podcast for a while, and then I was like, screw the podcast, and I decided to write a book instead. Wrote the book, and now I'm in a perfect segue to do the podcast, and I'm still kind of like, lo hago, no lo hago. Like,
Geraldine, we're in the opposite direction. I started with the podcast, and now I'm working on the book.
wow. Well, if you ever need help and support with your book, let me know, because
Yeah.
I'm definitely here for that.
Intercambiamos. And I have to say, we have Sábado Gigante was mentioned by Freddie. Hi, Freddie. I really love your background, by the way, when you had the camera on. And Primer Impacto are, yes, a lot of like older folks listen to them or are into it, but it really depends on, when you're talking about mainstream media, when you're talking about like big TV and big budgets, they're getting out in different ways that a podcaster would. So any other questions? Hearing none, one of the things that I would ask of you as a big favor is, like, the way podcasters get out there is or get recognized too is through reviews. So if you guys have a chance to listen to an episode or something, listen to the latest one. I really like the latest one too, with Brad. And just leave me a review. That would be like golden to any podcaster. So just click on that, hopefully a 5-star if you like it. And but yeah, and just hit me up on LinkedIn, or I know Sal put my social media handles there, and I would love to stay in touch. And I want to thank Techqueria for the invitation. I know that they're doing a lot more to elevate and mobilize our community. So it's been an awesome journey to have you guys as kind of allies.
Thank you, Adriana. This has been really great. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Our goal for the learners is to get you in and get you out within an hour, hopefully disrupt your day a little bit and have you walk away with uplifting you, giving you new knowledge, and building each other up in this community. So we have a few ideas. This was our first Lunch and Learn. So thank you for that. Thank you, Adriana, for being our about these signals over here. And so we're hoping to do a lot more. We're talking about ideas about personal finance. How do we save for our intergenerational everything, as Latinos. And then we're talking about how do we reach parents and have a little, circle around that. And there's so many things coming up. So follow us, check out our events.techqueria.org. This recording will be sent out to email for everyone who RSVP'd and also shared on their YouTube channel. So you can go back and rewatch it and hopefully get out some podcasts. We want to hear what you come up with. So join the Techqueria's podcast channel. Share your podcast once you release it. Let's hold each other accountable on that. And if you have any troubles joining Techqueria, the Slack channel, the Slack community, please reach out to me. I am Sal at techqueria.org, and we can get you in. Cool. Thank you everybody for being here. Have a great day. Thank you,
Gracias.
Adriana.
Hasta luego. Gracias a todos.
Gracias, Ariana.
Chao, chao.